The next item of business is an urgent question, and I call Douglas Ross. Point of order, Douglas Ross.
But before we get to the urgent question, Presiding Officer, I'm going to quote your words from yesterday. The Scottish Ministerial Code states, "The Scottish Government should be accountable to the Scottish Parliament. As a matter of courtesy and respect, I would expect that when a Minister cannot provide information in answer to a question in the Chamber, and when the Minister has committed to providing that answer in the Chamber, they should undertake to provide such detail to the member as soon as possible." 5 minutes ago, at 1 minute past 5, I received the information I had requested back on the 25th of November. Half an hour before that, the Scottish Government published the information on their website. So can I ask, Presiding Officer, for your understanding and your reaction to what I believe is a discourtesy not just to this Parliament, but to you personally, given your ruling last night?
Thank you, Mr Ross. I'm not aware of publication this afternoon, but I would reiterate wholeheartedly the comments I made yesterday in this chamber, and I would certainly ask that the Government reflect on those comments. We will now move on to the urgent question, and I call Douglas Ross.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will release all correspondence between the Scottish Government and Professor Alexis Jay, and what mechanism will be used to provide this information to MSPs in Parliament.
Minister Natalie Dawn-Innes.
Yes, and I want to apologise for not doing this already direct to Parliament and to the member, as we've committed to do. I therefore issued Mr Ross with the information today and provided it to the Education Committee, and as Mr Ross has stated, the information is also on the Scottish Government website.
Douglas Ross.
It is shocking. And I'm glad the First Minister is here, because he has serious questions to answer. Not only is it discourteous to the members who are asking about this, and I say members because across the political spectrum, people were asking for this correspondence, and it goes back months. Then yesterday, just yesterday, 24 hours ago, the Minister is saying she can't provide the information, it's going to go through the FOI process, and it may be published by the end of the year. And they had to be shamed into publishing it today. But they couldn't even do that right. They couldn't even give this Parliament the courtesy to provide that information to the members who had asked about it. They released it as an FOI early and then come to MSPs after 5 o'clock. I don't know what the reason or the explanation is for that. The Presiding Officer has asked the Government to reflect. I think we need a statement from the Government about what they were doing with this. But here's the issue. We also know why this information had to be dragged out of the Scottish Government. And John Swinney is staring right in front of him, because he can't look at me now, because the next thing I'm about to say is he's going to lose his Justice Secretary. Angela Constance is either going to have to resign or be sacked for misleading Parliament. In black and white, it is clear that the Justice Secretary did not tell the truth to this chamber. In black and white, it is clear that Professor Alexis Jay wanted that correction to be made. And I'm going to read out her full quote, if I can, Presiding Officer. "I have expressed no views on Mr Kerr's amendment, but I am of the opinion that the Scottish Government should urgently take steps to establish reliable data about the nature and extent of child sexual exploitation by organised networks, of which so-called grooming gangs is only one component. In the context of the National Strategic Group, I have had discussions with officials about how this might be achieved." Her final line is, "I would appreciate my position being clarified." That was sent to the Scottish Government, to the Justice Secretary, on the 26th of September. It was the 8th of October that the Government then put that information into minutes. 18th of November, the minutes of the meeting were published. And on the 19th of November, we got the first response from the Scottish Government, replying to my colleague Russell Finlay. They have been trying to hide this Ross, because they are trying to protect their Cabinet Secretary. Isn't that right?
Okay, there was a number of things in there, so I would start off by saying it was always my intention to provide the information. Therefore, I do want to repeat my apology to both the Chamber and the Presiding Officer for the confusion my letter to Mr Ross has caused, and I've made all the correspondence between the Scottish Government and Professor Jay available today. Now, on to the rest of Mr Ross's question. I have been very clear before. I think I made the same statement in my answer to the urgent question that came up, and Mr Ross has quoted Alexis Jay. I would once again want to put the facts on record. Ms Constance did note specifically that Professor Jay had been the chair of an independent inquiry into child sexual abuse in England and Wales, and had put on record in the past that in regard to child sexual abuse and exploitation, people should just get on with it. Of course, Professor Jay ministered at the Strategic Group's meeting in October that the quote was correct, but was from January and not made in relation to the amendment of the Victims Bill. Ms Constance did not state that Professor Jay was speaking directly about the amendment. She made a general point on Professor Jay's views on calls for inquiries, and that she also wanted to get on with the work needed to protect our children. And given the seriousness of the issue at hand, I think that should be all of our focus in this Parliament going forward.
Douglas Ross.
It should be the focus of this Parliament, but it's not, because we've been misled. Ministers have not been truthful. They've had to be dragged to this chamber to provide the information they have been sitting on, not just for weeks, but for months. And this goes right to the very top, to John Swinney. And this is now a test of his leadership. I believe when he leaves this chamber tonight, he will be asked by the media if he fully supports his Justice Secretary. And he can't. Because what these documents make very clear is she misled Parliament, and she did not take the immediate opportunity to correct the record. I just want to go through that timeline again. 26th of September, the Alexis Jay sends the email to the Government. On the 8th of October, there's a meeting of the National Strategic Group. On the 18th of November, the minutes of that meeting are published. On the 19th of November, there's a request for the correspondence. And on the 25th of November, Angela Constance denied misrepresenting Professor Alexis Jay. But the emails we've now seen show that the Professor said she was, the current position was unsatisfactory because the Government wouldn't publish her letter. So the question is, first, where is the Justice Secretary? Why is she not here in this chamber? And does the Minister believe, as I think most people will now, that the Justice Secretary's position is untenable? She should resign tonight or be sacked.
Minister.
I've been very clear in relation to the points made by Mr Ross there. Mr Ross started his answer to my previous response saying that there has been no focus on this issue, and I wholeheartedly disagree, and I'm very happy again to set out the steps that we are going to take around this issue. Last week we announced that Professor Alexis Jay has been appointed the independent chair for the National Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation Strategic Group. There will be an independent national review of the response to group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation in Scotland. The Cabinet, and once the independent national review is complete, the group independently chaired by Professor Jay will consider the findings and provide advice to ministers on next steps. That goes hand in hand with the review underway by Police Scotland, and we've been clear that there will be a statement on the matter next week as well. So, as I say, I've been very open and transparent in my answer to Mr Ross's original question, and I'm very happy to put on record the number of actions that this Government is taking to deal with this serious issue.
Thank you. I call Pauline McNeill.
So, from what we've just heard, it is clear-cut that Professor Alexis Jay's advice in that letter was consistent with this Parliament supporting the Tory amendment in the Victims Bill. That is clear. But rather than bring clarity last week to the review on grooming gangs, there's further confusion about who is leading the review on grooming gangs. That last week, the Government seemed to give the impression that Alexis Jay was leading this, but all press reports say that that is not the case. So firstly, can the Minister confirm who within the two groups is leading the review? Is it because it's the HM Inspectorate and there's the strategic group? So we need to know who is leading it. And further to that, I did highlight, for example, in last week's debate, that there were 46 children, one of which the victim Taylor was on, of children where the Police Scotland said that there would be an investigation. Now, I'd like to know, given the importance of this, and I did see this last week, is that list included in the review of grooming gangs before we get to the question of whether or not we need a full-blown inquiry?
Thank you. I would just remind members of the substantive question, Minister, in that regard.
Thank you. For clarity, last week we announced that Professor Alexis Jay has been appointed as the independent chair for the National Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation Strategic Group. We also announced that the Care Inspectorate and His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary in Scotland will lead an independent national review of responses to group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation. Now, in support of this work, Professor Jay met with the Chief Inspector of Constabulary and senior officials from the Care Inspectorate to offer her expertise and progress this work at pace. And further detail around this will be set out in the Government statement next week. Once that independent national review is complete, the group, which is chaired by Professor Jay, as I've just stated, will then consider the findings and provide further advice to ministers on next steps. In relation to Ms McNeill's second point, I will have to come back to her on that with the details.
Thank you. I call Russell Finlay.
The SNP have been shamed into finally issuing this FOI, and albeit redacted. And it confirms that the Cabinet Secretary misrepresented Professor Jay, but instead of coming clean, they embarked on a contemptuous cover-up in breach of the Ministerial Code. Now, I empathise with the Minister for the position that her government have put her in, but does she know if the Cabinet Secretary has offered her resignation?
Minister, again, in relation to the substantive question.
Yeah, I think I've been very clear here in relation to the facts that have been laid out in relation to the quotes that have been put forward by Ms Constance and Alexis Jay. I think we have got to the bottom of it, we can draw a line under it, and we can focus on the serious work ahead in relation to this most important issue.
Thank you. I call Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The NSPCC advised that the Scottish Government needs to show leadership. The Cabinet Secretary has responded to questions on grooming gangs in the Chamber, but when it comes to any question that involves correspondence between herself and Alexis Jay, she's either nowhere to be seen or not at her post to answer questions. So, given that the Minister wasn't able to answer questions that Polly McNeill put to the Government, can I ask her again, who is leading on this review into grooming gangs? Because it's still not clear. And does the Minister believe that the behaviours of the Cabinet Secretary jeopardise this non-inquiry review even before it gets off the ground?
Thank you. Again, Minister, in relation to the substantive question.
I have given this response 3 times now. The Care Inspectorate and His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary in Scotland are leading an independent national review of responses to group-based child sexual abuse. That goes hand in hand with the work of the National Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation Group that is led by Professor Alexis Jay.
And Sharon Dowie.
Thank you. Can I ask if the parliamentary record has been corrected yet, and if it's not, why not?
I must remind members that there is a substantive question on the paper, and it's important that questions refer to that question, if the Minister wishes to respond in that regard.
I've taken the steps that I have felt appropriate. I have come to the Chamber today. As I said, I have been very open and transparent around the confusion and the mix-up that has taken place. The information has now been provided in full, and as I say, I would now like to focus my attention going forward on the serious matters at hand and our steps that were taken to combat this.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the urgent question. Point of order, Douglas Ross.
On 2 points, Presiding Officer, can I ask if you will accept a notice without motion for the First Minister to be able to update Parliament if he still has confidence in his Justice Secretary and if she has offered her resignation to him? And secondly, Presiding Officer, can you confirm that if there has been no update to the official record as requested in the question from Sharon Dowie, that is a breach of the Code of Conduct for MSPs, because MSPs must update any corrections to the official record as soon as they are made aware of their error?
Thank you. I'm sure that all members are aware of the mechanisms that exist to correct the official report. And with regards to Mr Ross's other point, we will proceed with business as scheduled this afternoon. There will be other opportunities to discuss these matters.